Hello and welcome to Moon Lane TV. I'm Patience Agbabi, author of The Leap Cycle, a time travel adventure series. And today I'm here to talk about the series, about my inspirations, and to share an exclusive reading from the second in the series, The TimeThief, which is published today. And after the reading, I'll also share a writing exercise with you, so stay tuned. So the Leap Cycle series was really inspired by my hero, who is Elle. This is the cover of The Infinite. So there's Elle, and she's doing something very important. Just looks like she's jumping, but she's actually doing a lot more than that. Basically, Elle shares a lot of my characteristics. So apart from her name, of course, and her name's important because she's inspired by it because it's a palindrome, which means it reads the same way backwards as forwards. And she's very obsessed with wordplay, and she loves athletics. That's her number one love, and she loves the Olympics and the long jump. She's especially into sprinting and the long jump, and her favourite Olympics is the 1968 Olympics, where Bob Beamon made his amazing, phenomenal world record of 8 meters 90 centimeters, which is still the Olympic record to this day. So Elle's into all that, and I thought, well, to have a heroine really into leap years, why not make her a leapling? Why not make her born on the 29th of February? So I did that, and things started to take shape from there, really, because once I decided she was going to be a leapling, I then had this eureka moment, and I thought, well, what if she had the ability to leap through time? So that single word leap kind of opened up this whole world of this secret society of leaplings with the gift of time travel. And of course, Elle is the central one. And I very quickly created a friend for her called Big Ben. A lot of the characters have names to sort of do with time or maths or physics. And Big Ben is very tall, and he also likes to time things. So, but something else I wanted to do with this series was really create a neurodiverse cast, neurodivergent, because I'm very aware of in society, you know, there's a lot of neurodivergence around. My older boy's autistic. I know a lot of teenagers who have ADHD or dyslexia and so on. And yet, when you read books, you don't really find those characters in books enough. So it was something I felt quite passionately about. Although I'm not officially classed as neurodivergent myself, I do relate to quite a few of the characteristics. And so for me, it was about representation. It was also about representing a black neurodivergent heroine. So Elle is autistic. GMT, another character in the book, is autistic, but she's not diagnosed because she comes from 1968, where they wouldn't have diagnosed many people with autism, let alone girls. And Big Ben's autistic, but he also has dyslexia. And another character, MC Squared, has ADHD. So, but all of these characters, leaplings, so they all have this amazing power, this gift of time travel, and they have other gifts which are, partly, due to their neurodivergence. And I wanted to kind of merge those and sort of create a cast where you would see them kind of, I suppose, acting to their strengths. They'd face challenges because of their disability, but they'd also kind of overcome them and have strength and look after each other and support each other and so on. And it's also very much a novel about sort of making friendships as well. Anyway, so that's the kind of basis for the series. So the first book, The Infinite, as you've seen, it came out in 2020. Which is obviously a leap year. It's very deliberate because the idea behind the series is that they're kind of acting real time. So the first book will come out in 2020, the second in 2021, and so on. And it says on the back cover, fight crime across time, and that's the kind of key theme of the book, because what happens is Elle receives a mysterious message from the future just before her 12th, or rather 3-leap birthday. And so she has to travel to the year 2048, another leap year, in order to solve the crime. And it's very interesting getting into the futuristic mode, because it meant that I could look at current inventions like flying cars and and project them into the future. So you get flying cars, you get chronophones, which I think would be invented in the far future, because chronophones can text and send messages across past, present and future. But another good thing about having this futuristic theme was that I could also look at ecology. I could think, well, what are we doing to the planet now? What impact will that have in 2048? So I look at the impact of global warming and food production, and quite a few people have called it an eco-thriller. So, so to follow up from The Infinite, The TimeThief comes out today, which is very exciting. So yeah, the TimeThief is both a sort of, it's like a follow-up from The Infinite, but it's also a standalone book. So you don't have to have read The Infinite to read The TimeThief, but it's great if you read both, because Elle is kind of developed there. There's a sort of character development. She's 1 year old. You can see she actually looks older and kind of more kind of hip and trendy. She has to solve a different crime this time, on a day trip to the Museum of the Past, the Present and the Future. She witnesses the theft of an historic hourglass, and so it's up to her and her fellow friends to try to retrieve this hourglass. I'm very interested in hourglasses, actually. I'd like to sort of show you a bit more of a close-up of this one, which is it's so big it barely fits in the screen. But yeah, so this particular hourglass is it's very similar as I could possibly get to the one in the book that's stolen. So it's got black sand in it, etc., etc. And I'll just turn it upside down so you get the full effect. Basically, what's also interesting about the hourglass for me is that if you turn it to its side, it's the shape of an infinity symbol, which you may have noticed me wearing around my neck. The infinity symbol is really key to the whole series. Anyway, so this hourglass is stolen, and her friend MC² is arrested for the crime, and so it's imperative that Elle and her friends actually prove his innocence. So the TimeThief was primarily inspired by a visit to the Royal Observatory at Greenwich, where they got a beautiful selection of hourglasses, but they also reminded me that, of course, in the year 1752, which happens to be a leap year, in 1752, 11 days were cut out of the calendar, which I found very interesting. And I thought all my Leapling friends would be especially interested in that leap year. So it became 1752 basically is the favourite leap year for Leaplings. And also by wonderful coincidence, it was the same year that the black slave, 10-year-old Francis Barber, became servant to the very famous lexicographer, the dictionary maker Samuel Johnson. So to celebrate Publication Day, I decided to pick a passage that celebrates books very much. It says on the back, leap into the past, and that's exactly what I'm going to be doing with you today. So I'm going to share with you a passage where Elle and Big Ben have leapt back to 1752, and they're in the house of Dr. Johnson, who is at the time is called Mr. Johnson, because he was made a doctor in well after 1752. So he's working on his dictionary. So he tells them that if they want to take a look at the dictionary, they need to go up the spiral staircase right to the top of the house, where there's a converted loft, which is his workplace. The garret is a word paradise. It's a huge, long, light room, the length of the whole house, with piles and piles of brown hardback books scattered all over the place and covered in dust. Some of the piles are so high, they're like sculptures. I've never seen so many books outside a library. They're old and faded with battered spines. Mr. Johnson's books are like his clothes. Several men are standing at a long table, copying out passages from books in beautiful, sloping, old-fashioned handwriting onto slips of paper. Everything's larger than life. I feel tiny, even though I'm tall for my age. Halfway along the wall is a writing desk with an inkpot on it and a very large chair with only 3 legs, which must be where Mr. Johnson sits. One of the men comes over, a short, stocky man in a clean white wig, who looks much younger than Mr. Johnson. "You must be friends of young Frank," he says, and before we can correct him or ask who young Frank is, come in and see words at work." On the table are sheets of paper nearly 2 feet high, with slips of paper all over them, covered with written extracts from poems. I thought it was a dictionary, not a poetry anthology. I know that sounds rude, but I wasn't expecting that at all. Mr. Johnson just said he'd used extracts from Anon's poems, but all the dictionaries I've seen give definitions of the words in prose. Mr. Johnson is an expert on poems, the man explains. He is a poet himself, and his head is bursting with them. Why use prose when you could use poetry, he always says. But in my humble opinion, he prefers poems because he can remember them. He has an uncommon memory and is constantly speaking them aloud. We have difficulty keeping a pace with him. Why are the pages so big? To fit all the words on, young madam. There will be 2 volumes, for the first only takes us to the letter K. I smile. People accuse me of speaking like I've swallowed a dictionary. Imagine if I swallowed this one. Heavy footsteps are coming up the stairs. Mr. Johnson joins us a minute later. He must be fit because he's not out of breath at all. I wonder how fast he can run the 100 metres. I don't ask him though. That would be inappropriate. I trust you have occupied my scribes, he says, for I always out-talk and out-quote them. Big Ben's looking at the pages intently, and I'm reminded of his dyslexia. When he tries to read printed books, he says the letters move around like ants crawling across the page. But this handwriting looks so beautiful in blue-black ink, it doesn't matter that you can't read it. Each S looks like an F, and there are lots of swirly doodles. I find it hard to read handwriting at the best of times, and I love reading. It must be impossible for Big Ben. Handwriting is very different to print. Do you tell them what to write down, Mr. Johnson? He says. Indeed I do, but they have to check quotations from the library. He gestures to the piles of books on the floor. I pride myself on accuracy, but it is the job of the scribes to locate the sources. Shakespeare is simple, but anonymous a superior challenge. He smiles. What if you made a spelling mistake? They begin over again, but spelling has been a fickle phenomenon, young man. Before dictionaries, you could spell a word every which way you liked. The great playwright himself spelt his name in all manner of abbreviations and spellings, from Shakespeare to Shakespeare with an A. And it was printed in many more days than there are days of the week. Nowadays, however, there is a fashion for fixing the language. But take heed, young man, the language refuses to be fixed. Big Ben nods. I can tell he likes the idea of spelling things lots of different ways. Maybe now he'd be more open to travelling further back into the past, when people thought differently. Before dictionaries, he'd be less stressed about spelling words wrong. Do you have a favourite word in your dictionary, sir? I say. No, I do not. But here is one for you. Back friend. It means a friend backwards, an enemy in secret. I thought it might appeal to you, since Anon informs me you are a poet inspired by reversing the natural order of things. Beware the back friend, Elle, but treasure the genuine article. Big Ben is clearly the latter, a true friend. Thank you, sir, we say, at exactly the same time. Okay, thank you for listening to my reading. So now I would like to share with you a kind of writing exercise. So the leap cycle began with the character Elle, literally just one person, and not even just Elle as a character, but actually just started with the name. I found the name very interesting, the fact that it read the same backwards and forwards and so on. So I started to sort of create her character from that. And if anything, I got some of the time travel idea from that idea of being able to move both forwards and backwards in time rather than forwards as we normally expect. So, and of course, when I came up with the name for Big Ben, as you've heard, I sort of started to build his character from the name Big Ben. So what I'd like you to do now is to brainstorm a character based on terminology from your hobby, something that you absolutely love doing. So I think if you're into something, you become an expert on it, you know, without having to do obvious research. You naturally do the research because you love it, and that will come through in the writing, not just both to make everything plausible, but also the passion behind it. So to give you an example, both of my boys are F1 mad, and so I made up this character, Pit Stop, right, which made them laugh, so I knew it must be working. And basically I thought, well, what would Pit Stop be like? And I thought, well, it'd be a boy. I thought of him as a teenage boy called Pit Stop. And he would basically be a very sort of, I don't know, he'd think things through before doing them. He'd be, he'd want to get things right, and he'd probably be quite slow in thinking. Whereas if you had somebody called Lights Out, for example, they'd be really sort of lively person who just maybe sort of go without thinking. I wanted him to be quite a sort of level-headed sort of person. So I'm thinking, if you can think of like your hobby and what you're into and come up with a nickname, if the word from your hobby is really unusual, that's actually quite a good thing, because nicknames are often a bit weird. So as a sort of example, I thought, well, if you're into, I don't know, for example, ballet, you might have a character called Arabesque, which I thought is a great word. If you're into football, you might have a character called Red Card. Or if you're into cooking, you could have a character called Marinade. All right, so yeah, so come up with an idea, come up with a sort of a very, very unusual kind of name from something that you're into, and then once you've done that, kind of make notes, sort of bounce off that particular, just that one word, and just sort of see, do a sort of mind map. It's just like a spider. So you've got to have something in the middle and things spiking off as to all the ideas you think about that character. What sort of person are they inside? What's the character like? What do they look like? And what do they sound like? How do they speak? Okay, and then when you've done that, I'd like you to give your character a challenge, all right? Because in any good book, you often have a character who kind of wants something and they can't get it, and that's where the tension and the excitement comes in. So to give you an example, so a character like Pit Stop would he might decide, I'd rather not be in the pit stop. I want to actually be the person driving the car, and that could be his challenge, almost, to overcome and convince people he's good enough to actually be an F1 driver. Your Arabesque might want to fly to the moon. Red Card might want to be green, and Marinade might want to be called Marianne. So there you've got it. You just from leaping off a character's name, you can kind of get a story from that. And once you get the story, you're kind of you're rolling with it. You might want to create more characters. You might want to have a best friend, like I've got Elle and Big Ben. You might want to create a best friend character also with an interesting name, and have them kind of work together and sort of show their relationship developing too. But what I would say about writing is the key thing about a novel is the characters. If you're interested, if the characters are interesting and unique, and people are really excited and want to know what happens to them. So don't worry too much about the plot at this stage. The most important thing is to create a great character. And good luck with that. Okay, well, it's time for me to go now. I've really enjoyed being with you today. Again, I'm Patience Agbabi. My book, The TimeThief, is out today, and it's available from Moon Lane Bookshop, both the bookshop itself, which is now open, so please do go and buy a copy, also available online. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to catching up with you in person soon. Bye-bye.